The coffee dispenser on Helios 7 made a sound like a dying cat every third cup, and Adrian Cole had reached cup number 6 of his shift. He stood in the narrow galley, watching brown liquid sputter into his mug while the machine wheezed its mechanical death rattle, and wondered, not for the first time, if humanity's first contact with an alien species really needed to happen in a place where the appliances were actively suicidal. Outside the porthole, Jupiter hung like a swollen orange eye, watching. Always watching. Adrian had stopped finding it majestic somewhere around month 2 of his assignment. Now it just felt like cosmic surveillance, which seemed fitting given his current job. He carried his coffee down the corridor toward Lab 7, passing the usual morning parade of researchers and military observers who all nodded at him with that special mixture of envy and pity reserved for people with impossible jobs. Dr. Sarah Chen from Xenobiology actually mouthed, "Good luck," as she passed, which didn't bode well for the session ahead. The door to Lab 7 slid open with a pneumatic hiss that always reminded Adrian of a disappointed sigh. Inside, the alien woman sat in her usual chair by the observation window, silhouetted against the starfield beyond. She didn't turn when he entered. She never did. "Good morning, Lyra," Adrian said, settling into the chair across from her and pulling up his tablet. 3 months of this. 3 months of the most significant cultural exchange in human history, and it felt like interviewing a particularly polite statue. "Good morning, Dr. Cole." Her voice was pleasant, accentless, perfectly modulated. She'd learned English in 48 hours and spoke it better than most native speakers. "I trust you rested adequately." "Sure, yeah. The usual." He hadn't, actually. The station's night cycle lighting gave him headaches, and his quarters were right next to the air recycling system, which hummed like an angry refrigerator at 2 in the morning. But Lyra didn't need to know that. She didn't need to know anything about him, apparently. After 3 months, she'd never asked a single personal question. Lyra finally turned to face him, and Adrian felt the same small jolt he always did when seeing her straight on. She was beautiful in that uncanny way that made his brain stumble over itself trying to reconcile familiar with foreign. Everything about her read as human, the structure of her face, the warm bronze of her skin, the dark hair that fell past her shoulders, except for those ears. They rose from the sides of her head in elegant points, longer than human ears, slightly mobile in a way that suggested they could swivel and focus like a cat's. The effect was simultaneously subtle and completely alien. "Shall we continue with the agricultural practices discussion from yesterday?" she asked, folding her hands in her lap with the practiced patience of someone who'd been through this routine too many times. Adrian pulled up his notes, squinting at the screen. Right. Agricultural practices. The committee had submitted another 17 pages of questions about crop rotation on her homeworld because apparently, the first question humanity wanted to ask an alien species was whether they'd figured out nitrogen fixing. Sure. Question 43. Does your society employ genetically modified organisms in food production, and if so, what ethical frameworks govern their use? Yes. The E3 have utilized controlled genetic modification for approximately 4,000 years by your calendar. Our ethical framework prioritizes ecological integration and long-term sustainability over short-term yield increases. We consider it ethically necessary to ensure that any modified organism can be safely reintroduced to wild populations without causing cascade failures in the ecosystem. Perfect. Informative. Absolutely devoid of personality. Adrian typed the response, fighting the urge to just copy and paste, insert diplomatic answer here, because honestly, would anyone notice? Question 44, he continued, scrolling down. What role do communal versus private food production systems play in your society's structure? The E3 maintain a hybrid system. Approximately 60% of food production occurs in communal facilities managed by regional councils, while 40% occurs in private or family-based gardens. This balance allows for both efficiency and personal creative expression in food cultivation. Adrian typed. The coffee maker's death rattle echoed in his memory. Jupiter stared through the window like an invigilator during an exam. Question 45. Can you describe any traditional or ceremonial foods that hold cultural significance for your people? Lyra recited another flawless paragraph about harvest festivals and foods prepared for coming-of-age ceremonies and the symbolic importance of certain grains. Her amber eyes, another uncanny detail, too luminous to be quite human, remained fixed on a point somewhere past his left shoulder. She could have been reading from a teleprompter for all the emotion in her voice. This was it. This was humanity's great leap into the cosmos. A linguist sitting in a recycled air can orbiting a research station, asking agricultural questions to someone who answered like she was testifying before a parliamentary committee. Adrian had imagined first contact differently. Everyone had. When Lyra's ship materialized near Jupiter's orbit 9 months ago, just appeared, no warp signature, no propulsion trail, just suddenly there like a magic trick, the world had lost its collective mind. An alien species. Reaching out. Requesting asylum. Offering cultural exchange. It was supposed to be profound, transformative, the moment when humanity stepped into a larger universe. Instead, it was question 46. What percentage of your population engages in food production as a primary occupation? Approximately 8%, Lyra answered. Though most Etheri maintain small personal gardens regardless of occupation, as cultivation is considered both meditative practice and civic duty. Adrian's fingers moved automatically across the tablet, recording her response. His mind wandered. It did that a lot lately. He wondered if the committee ever actually read these transcripts or if they just filed them away to make themselves feel important. He wondered if Lyra was as bored as he was. He wondered if she had feelings about anything at all or if her people had somehow evolved past the messy inconvenience of emotions. He wondered what he'd done to deserve this assignment. Distinguished career in xenolinguistics, sure. Published papers on theoretical frameworks for alien communication. But theory was different from practice, and practice was turning out to be death by agricultural questionnaire. Question 47, Adrian heard himself say, and even his own voice sounded automated now. How does your society handle crop failures or food shortages? Lyra launched into another perfectly structured response about distribution networks and emergency reserves and community support systems. Adrian typed. Jupiter judged. The station hummed its endless mechanical song. Somewhere around question 52, Adrian's exhaustion hit critical mass. He'd been on Helios 7 for 4 months total, 3 of them doing this exact routine with Lyra. Every day. 6 hours of questions and clinical answers. 6 hours of the most significant human-alien interaction in history feeling like the world's most tedious job interview. He was tired. He was lonely. He was starting to question whether this prestigious assignment was anything more than elaborate babysitting with a xenolinguistics degree as a requirement. Lyra was explaining something about seasonal planting cycles, her voice maintaining that same pleasant, informative tone that revealed absolutely nothing about the person behind it. Adrian's attention drifted to her ears, watching them make tiny adjustments as she spoke. They really were remarkable, those ears. Probably extraordinary hearing. Probably could pick up sounds humans missed entirely. The thought circled through his tired brain as Lyra continued her recitation. She was here, in this room, spending 6 hours every day answering humanity's questions with the patience of a saint and the personality of a recorded message. Didn't she get tired? Didn't she want to talk about something, anything, that mattered? Didn't she ever just want to be a person instead of a diplomatic representative? The words left Adrian's mouth before his brain fully registered forming them, barely vocalized, more breath than sound, the kind of mutter you make when you think you're alone with your thoughts. God, I wish you'd just be real for 5 minutes. Lyra stopped mid-sentence. Her head snapped toward him with a speed that was decidedly not human, those amber eyes suddenly locked onto his with an intensity that made Adrian's heart kick against his ribs. For 3 months, she'd barely looked at him directly. Now she was staring like she could see straight through his skull. What, Adrian started, but his voice dried up under that gaze. Lyra's ears had swiveled forward, focused entirely on him. Her perfectly composed expression had cracked, showing something underneath: surprise, maybe. Vulnerability. Something raw and unguarded that transformed her whole face from diplomatic mask to actual person. "What did you just say?" Her voice was different. Softer. Uncertain. Adrian blinked, his tired brain struggling to catch up. What? I didn't, I was just asking question 53, about. No. Lyra leaned forward, and there was an urgency in her movement that Adrian had never seen before. Before that. Just now. What did you just say? He stared at her, confused, trying to remember. Had he said something? Out loud? He'd been thinking, he'd been tired, he'd been, oh no. It was nothing, I was just thinking, I didn't mean. Please. The word hung in the air between them, and there was something almost desperate in it. Please, just, say it again. Exactly what you said. Adrian felt heat creeping up his neck. His whispered thought. His barely vocalized frustration. She'd heard it. Of course she'd heard it. Those ears. That hearing. She'd been hearing everything, all his mutters and sighs, and this was it. He'd just torpedoed humanity's first contact because he couldn't keep his exhausted thoughts to himself. But Lyra wasn't angry. She was looking at him like he'd just said something profound instead of something catastrophically unprofessional, and her hands were gripping the arms of her chair, and for the first time in 3 months, she looked absolutely, undeniably real. Adrian's mouth opened and closed twice before any sound came out. I'm not sure what I said exactly. It was just, I was tired, and I muttered something, I didn't think. You said you wished I would just be real for 5 minutes. Lyra's voice was quiet, but there was something sharp underneath it. Not anger. Something else. You said it so quietly that you probably didn't even realize you vocalized it at all. The air in Lab 7 suddenly felt very thin. Adrian's tablet slipped in his sweating palms. I'm sorry. That was completely inappropriate. I didn't mean for you to, I didn't think you could. He was babbling now, watching his career circle the drain in real time. It's been a long few months and I'm tired, and that's not an excuse, I know, but I would never intentionally. How many? Lyra interrupted. Adrian stopped mid-word. How many what? How many times have you muttered things like that? Things you thought I couldn't hear? The heat in Adrian's face went from uncomfortable to volcanic. Oh God. Oh God. Every frustrated sigh. Every time he complained about the committee's questions. Every moment he thought he was alone with his thoughts during their sessions. His mind scrolled through 3 months of possible mortifications. Listen, whatever I said, I apologize. All of it. Every word. I'll submit a formal. Adrian. She used his first name for the first time ever, and it stopped him cold. I'm not angry. I need you to understand that. I'm not offended. I just need to know, was that the first time you've said something like that, or have there been others? He stared at her, trying to read her expression. Those amber eyes were fixed on him with an intensity that made it hard to think. Yes. I've probably muttered things. I talk to myself sometimes when I'm working. It's a bad habit. But I never meant for you to hear any of it. But I did hear it. Lyra leaned back in her chair, and something in her posture shifted. The diplomatic stiffness drained away, replaced by something looser, almost exhausted. Adrian, my people, the ethery, we don't hear the way humans do. Your hearing is limited. Narrow. You evolved in a world where sound traveled through air at predictable frequencies, where a whisper was genuinely private. We didn't. Adrian's linguist brain perked up despite his embarrassment. Your homeworld has different acoustic properties. Our atmosphere is denser. Sound carries further, clearer. But more than that, our evolution prioritized auditory processing over almost everything else. We can hear, she paused, searching for words. Frequencies you can't imagine. The vibration of intent behind words. The microscopic changes in breathing that accompany genuine emotion versus performed speech. What you call a whisper, something so quiet you barely register vocalizing it. I hear it as clearly as if you'd spoken at normal volume. The implications hit Adrian like cold water. Everything. You've heard everything I've muttered for 3 months. A smile flickered across Lyra's face, brief and startling. You really don't like the coffee dispenser. You've described it as Satan's espresso machine at least 14 times. Adrian buried his face in his hands. Kill me now. You also think Commander Petrov's morning briefings are where vocabulary goes to die. You've questioned the sexual orientation of whoever designed the station's shower pressure approximately 6 times per week, and last Tuesday, you spent 4 minutes muttering creative variations on the theme of bureaucratic inefficiency that I genuinely found impressive. I'm resigning, Adrian said into his palms. I'm resigning right now. I'll write it on my tablet. Dear committee, I'm an unprofessional disaster. Goodbye. Adrian, look at me. He didn't want to. He wanted Jupiter to open up and swallow the station whole. But something in her voice made him lower his hands. Lyra wasn't smiling anymore, but her expression had softened in a way he'd never seen. In the 3 months I've been on Helio 7, surrounded by your scientists and diplomats and military observers, do you know how many people have spoken to me with genuine emotion? With real, unfiltered human honesty? Adrian shook his head. 1. You. Just now. That single whispered sentence. Her ears twitched, a small movement that might have been unconscious. Everyone else performs for me. They read their approved scripts. They ask their committee-generated questions. They smile with their mouths but not their eyes. They treat me like I'm either a specimen to be studied or a political asset to be managed. But you, she paused. You forgot I was either of those things for exactly 3 seconds, and you were just, honest. Honestly rude, Adrian muttered, then winced. Sorry. That was another mutter, wasn't it? Yes. And I appreciate it more than you know. Lyra shifted in her chair, turning to face him fully. Can I tell you something? Something that's not in any of my official statements or approved cultural briefings. Adrian nodded, not trusting his voice. I'm lonely. The words came out soft, almost hesitant. I've been lonely since the day I arrived. I requested asylum from your species because I was desperate, and I've spent every day since being professionally pleasant to people who see me as a job, not a person. You're the first human who's accidentally treated me like I'm real. The irony hit Adrian with enough force to make him laugh. It came out shaky, slightly hysterical. I whispered that I wished you'd be real. And you heard it. Because you have superhuman hearing. That's the most science fiction sentence I've ever said out loud. Lyra's smile returned, wider this time. Your species has a funny relationship with irony. We don't really have a word for it in Etherian. The closest translation would be the universe's sense of humor, which isn't quite the same thing. The universe's sense of humor is pretty cruel, then. Adrian ran a hand through his hair. So you've just been hearing all my thoughts. For months. Not thoughts. Thoughts are silent. But everything you breathe out, everything you unconsciously vocalize. Yes. And before you ask, no, I haven't told anyone. It felt. She searched for the word. Invasive. Like reading someone's diary without permission. Your whispers weren't meant for me. But you heard them anyway. But I heard them anyway. Lyra's expression turned apologetic. I should have said something earlier. I know that. But honestly, your muttering was the most interesting part of my day. Everyone else was so carefully controlled. You were human. Adrian laughed again, more genuine this time. I'm going to have to recalibrate my entire understanding of privacy around you, aren't I? Probably. Though if it helps, most of what you mutter is complaints about station maintenance and the committee's question selection. You're not accidentally revealing state secrets. Mostly you're just cranky about the coffee. The coffee deserves it. The coffee absolutely deserves it. Lyra leaned forward conspiratorially. I tried it once. Out of curiosity. It tasted like someone dissolved despair in hot water. Adrian snorted. That's exactly what it is. I'm convinced the station sources it from a place that specifically sells beverages of suffering. Is that a human concept? Beverages of suffering? It should be. We'd make a fortune. He was smiling now, actually smiling, and Lyra was smiling back, and something in the air between them had fundamentally shifted. The diplomatic distance had collapsed. They were just two people talking. Then reality reasserted itself. The committee is going to notice. If we stop following the script, if our sessions become actual conversations, someone's going to flag it. Lyra's expression hardened. Let them flag it. I didn't travel across space to answer agricultural questionnaires forever. I came here because, she stopped, something flickering across her face. Fear, maybe. Or uncertainty. Because? Adrian prompted. That's a longer conversation. One that probably needs better coffee than the station provides. She stood, moving to the window where Jupiter hung in eternal observation. But here's what I can tell you now, I left my homeworld because I couldn't breathe there anymore. Not literally, obviously. But in every way that mattered. And I chose humanity because I'd studied your species from afar, and you seemed like people who understood the value of privacy. Of having inner lives. Of not knowing everything about everyone around you. That's a strange reason to seek asylum. Is it? Lyra turned back to face him. Your species keeps secrets. You can have private thoughts. You can choose what to share and what to hold back. For my people, none of that exists. We hear everything. Every breath, every whisper, every emotional tremor in someone's voice. Our entire society is built on radical transparency because deception is literally impossible. And her voice cracked slightly. I wanted something different. I wanted mystery. I wanted the chance to not know everything. Adrian processed this, his linguist brain spinning. But you can still hear everything. You came to us for privacy, but you have the biological equipment that makes privacy impossible. I know. It's absurd. Lyra laughed, but it sounded tired. I came to a species that values secrets, but I'm physically incapable of not hearing yours. It's like, what's that human story? About the king who wanted touch but everything he touched turned to gold. Midas. Midas. I'm the Midas of privacy. I came seeking it, but my very presence destroys it. She met his eyes. Unless someone knows. Unless someone chooses to share their whispers with me anyway, knowing I can hear them. That's not invasion. That's something else. Maybe trust. The weight of what she was asking settled over Adrian. You want me to keep muttering. You want me to keep being real, even though you can hear everything. I want to know if it's possible to have honest communication with someone who knows I can hear their every breath. I want to know if connection can exist without privacy, if it's built on awareness instead. Lyra's ears swiveled toward him, and her voice dropped. And selfishly, I want to talk to someone who sees me as a person, not a diplomatic puzzle. Even if that person is cranky about coffee and thinks agricultural questionnaires are slowly killing his soul. Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the alien features to the loneliness underneath. You heard that too? Question 37. You whispered, "This is what death feels like," under your breath. It was a rough day. Most of your days seem rough. Station life isn't exactly thrilling. Adrian made a decision then, one that would probably complicate both their lives in ways he couldn't predict. Okay. New deal. No more scripts. No more committee questions unless absolutely necessary. We talk. Actual conversations. I'll try to be aware that you can hear my whispers, and you tell me when you do. At least then I'll have the dignity of knowing when I've accidentally revealed something. Lyra's whole face brightened. You do that? Even knowing your supervisors will probably object. They can write me up. I didn't sign up for this job to read agricultural questionnaires to the loneliest alien in the solar system. He smiled. Besides, you're right. The committee's questions are terrible. If I have to ask one more thing about crop rotation, I'm jumping out an airlock. The airlocks require command authorization. I'll find a way. Motivated linguists are resourceful. For the first time since they'd met, Lyra laughed, really laughed, a sound that was startlingly human except for a slight harmonic quality that made Adrian think of bells. I think, she said, this is going to be much more interesting than agricultural practices. Adrian raised his coffee mug in a mock toast. Too interesting. And to Satan's espresso machine, who brought us together. Lyra touched her hand to his mug in an approximation of a toast. To whispers heard and honesty chosen. Outside the window, Jupiter continued its eternal watching, but somehow it felt less like surveillance now and more like a witness to something that might actually matter. The first sign that their new arrangement was going to cause problems came exactly 36 hours after Adrian and Lyra abandoned the script. Dr. Patricia Hammond from the Oversight Committee called an emergency meeting, which in station terms meant she showed up at Adrian's quarters at 0600 with a tablet full of highlighted passages and a facial expression that could curdle milk. Care to explain why yesterday's session transcript reads like a comedy routine instead of a xenocultural interview? She thrust the tablet at him before he'd even finished rubbing sleep from his eyes. Adrian squinted at the screen, his brain not yet fully online. The transcript was indeed unconventional. Where it should have read, Question 58, describe your species' approach to conflict resolution, it instead featured a 20-minute tangent where Lyra had explained that Etherian arguments were basically impossible because everyone could hear the emotional truth behind every statement, which led to Adrian joking that humans had solved this by developing sarcasm, which led to Lyra attempting sarcasm for the first time with results that could only be described as technically correct but deeply unsettling. We're building rapport, Adrian said, which was true. Cultural exchange requires trust. Trust requires genuine interaction. Cultural exchange requires data collection following established protocols. Patricia's eyes narrowed. The subject has also stopped cooperating with other researchers entirely. She refused to attend Dr. Yamamoto's cognitive testing session yesterday, claiming she had better things to do. Adrian tried not to smile at that. Lyra had actually said she'd rather listen to the air recycling system than submit to another round of reaction time tests, but he wasn't about to share that detail. I'll talk to her about maintaining relationships with the whole research team, he offered, knowing full well he wouldn't. Patricia left with a warning about professional standards and proper documentation, which Adrian immediately forgot because Lyra had somehow hacked the station's internal messaging system to send him a text that read, "She sounds angry. Her breathing pattern suggests elevated cortisol. Did I cause problems?" He messaged back, "How did you access station communications? Your security is adorable. Also, you didn't answer my question. You caused problems. Worth it though. Good. I was worried I'd gotten you in trouble. Also, your shower is running. You left it on." Adrian swore and lunged for the bathroom. The message came through before he reached the door, "Made you look. Humans are delightfully gullible. He was definitely going to regret teaching her about pranks. Their afternoon session started with Lyra attempting a solemn face and announcing, "I have prepared answers to questions 59 through 73 about Etherian textile production, per the committee's request." Adrian stared at her. "Really?" "No. I'm practicing deception." "How am I doing?" "Terrible. Your ears betrayed you. They do this little forward tilt when you're lying." Lyra's hands flew to her ears. "They do not." "They absolutely do. I've been watching them for weeks. Well, months. It's not creepy, it's linguistic observation. It's moderately creepy." But she was smiling. "Fine. No textile questions. What should we talk about instead?" Adrian had actually prepared for this. "I want to know about your ship. The one you arrived in. It just appeared near Jupiter's orbit with no propulsion signature, no warp trail, nothing. Our physicists have been losing their minds trying to figure out how that's possible." Lyra's expression shifted to something almost mischievous. "Are you asking as a linguist or as a curious human? Is there a difference? One gets an official answer. One gets the truth." She tilted her head, ears swiveling slightly. "Your heartbeat just accelerated. You're excited about this. Stop reading my biological functions. It's cheating. You're literally incapable of hiding your interest. Your breathing changed, your posture shifted forward, and you're doing that thing where you tap your thumb against your tablet when you're trying not to interrupt. Humans are very loud, physically speaking." Adrian consciously stopped tapping. "Fine. I'm interested. Now tell me about the ship before I die of curiosity." "It's not faster than light travel," Lyra said, settling back into her chair. "That's what your scientists keep assuming, but they're thinking about the problem wrong. We don't move through space. We move space itself. That's not helpful. That's just word games. No, it's precise. Your species thinks of location as fixed. You are here, your destination is there, and travel means crossing the distance between. But location isn't fixed. Space is flexible. We developed technology that essentially," she paused, searching for vocabulary. "Imagine you have a piece of paper with two dots on it. Normal travel means drawing a line from one dot to the other. We fold the paper so the dots touch." Adrian's brain stuttered. "You're talking about folding spacetime. That requires energy levels that would make a star look like a nightlight. Only if you're thinking about it wrong. You don't need to overpower spacetime. You need to convince it to cooperate." Lyra leaned forward. "Everything in the universe has a natural frequency, including space itself. Find the right frequency, create the right resonance, and space will fold for you. It's not force. It's persuasion. You're telling me your entire species' approach to faster-than-light travel is based on asking space nicely?" "Essentially, yes. We're very good at listening to frequencies. It wasn't a huge leap to learn how to speak them back." Adrian laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from pure delight at the universe being stranger than expected. "Your people developed interstellar travel through acoustic engineering. That's the most on-brand thing I've ever heard. Your people developed nuclear weapons before you developed adequate coffee technology. Everyone has their priorities. That's fair. Our coffee is a crime against beverages." Adrian was typing notes now, his fingers flying across the tablet. "So the ship that brought you here, it's essentially a tuning fork for spacetime? Crude but not inaccurate. Though calling it a tuning fork is like calling your brain a meat computer. Technically true but missing the elegance. My brain is absolutely a meat computer. It runs on coffee and spite." Lyra made a sound that might have been a snort. "You know what's strange? Talking to you like this, having actual conversations instead of reciting approved information, it's the first time since I arrived that I've felt like I'm actually on an adventure instead of just processed. Processed? That's what the last 3 months felt like. Being processed. Scanned, catalogued, interviewed, tested. Very thorough. Very professional. Utterly dehumanizing. Which is ironic because I'm not human, but you understand what I mean. Adrian did understand. For what it's worth, I felt the same way. Like I was processing you instead of meeting you. The committee wanted data, not connection. Well, now they're getting connection whether they want it or not. Lyra's ears perked up suddenly. Someone's coming down the corridor. 2 people. One of them is breathing like they're nervous. The other is trying to walk quietly, which is adorable because I can hear their heartbeat from here. How far away are they? 20 meters. 19. 18. You might want to look like we're having an official session. Adrian barely had time to pull up a random document before the door opened. Commander Petrov entered, followed by Dr. Sarah Chen, who did indeed look nervous. Dr. Cole. Lyra. Petrov had mastered the art of looking stern while saying very little. I need to discuss the direction of these cultural exchange sessions. Of course, Commander. Adrian tried to look professional. We were just discussing Etherian approaches to space travel. So I've heard. The issue is that Dr. Chen here has been waiting 3 weeks to conduct cognitive assessments with Lyra, and she's been repeatedly declined. All eyes turned to Lyra, who met Petrov's gaze with perfect calm. The assessments are repetitive. I've completed similar tests with 4 other researchers. The data redundancy seems inefficient. The protocol requires. The protocol was designed for optimal data collection, yes. Lyra's voice remained pleasant, but something sharp edged into it. What it wasn't designed for was my comfort, my time, or my dignity as a sentient being. I'm not a lab specimen, Commander. I'm a refugee who offered cultural exchange in return for asylum. Exchange implies mutuality. What I've experienced so far is extraction. The silence that followed could have been cut with a knife. Adrian found himself holding his breath. Petrov's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. What would you consider mutual exchange? Conversation. Actual dialogue, not interrogation. Dr. Cole is the first person who's asked me questions because he's genuinely curious, not because he's working through a checklist. If other researchers approached our interactions that way, I'd be significantly more cooperative. Sarah Chen cleared her throat. I can adjust my approach. I'd be happy to structure sessions more conversationally if that's preferable. Lyra's ears tilted toward her, the gesture Adrian now recognized as focused attention. Your heart rate just spiked. You're nervous. Why? What? I'm not. You are. I can hear it. Which makes me curious, are you nervous about changing your approach, or nervous about something else? Sarah glanced at Petrov, then back at Lyra. Honestly? I'm nervous because every researcher on this station is terrified of offending you. We know you could leave any time. Your ship is still docked. You're not a prisoner. So we follow protocols and tread carefully because we're all worried that if we do the wrong thing, humanity loses its first alien contact. The honesty seemed to surprise everyone, including Sarah herself. Lyra stared at her for a long moment, then did something unexpected, she laughed. You're all walking on eggshells around me. That's what this has been. Well, yes. I thought you were all just very formal. I thought that was human culture. Lyra shook her head, still smiling. No wonder everything felt so stiff. You've all been performing perfect politeness because you're worried I'll leave. Will you? Petrov asked bluntly. Leave? Lyra's smile faded into something more serious. I left my homeworld because I couldn't live there anymore. I came here because I'd studied humanity from a distance and thought you might understand what I was looking for. I'm not leaving. Not unless you force me to. Then perhaps, Petrov said slowly, we can all stop walking on eggshells. Dr. Chen, work with Dr. Cole to restructure your assessment approach. Lyra, I expect you to engage with more of the research team, not just Adrian. And everyone, he looked between them. Remember that first contact doesn't have to be perfectly professional to be valuable. Dismissed. After they left, Adrian turned to Lyra. You know you just voluntarily agreed to more sessions with other researchers, right? I know. But if they stop treating me like delicate alien China, it might actually be bearable. She grinned. Besides, I'm training them. If I can teach your entire research team to have actual conversations instead of conducting interviews, I'll have accomplished something genuinely useful. You're weaponizing friendship. I'm strategically deploying authenticity. There's a difference. Adrian laughed. I'm pretty sure this isn't what the committee had in mind for cultural exchange. The committee needs better vision. Lyra stood, stretching in a way that was distinctly feline. Same time tomorrow. I want to tell you about Etherian music. You'll hate it. Why would I hate it? Because it's performed at frequencies humans can't hear. You'll have to take my word that it's beautiful. That seems deeply unfair. Most of the universe is deeply unfair. But at least now we can complain about it together. 6 weeks after their arrangement began, Adrian found Lyra in the observation lounge at 2 in the morning, staring at Earth like it held answers to questions she hadn't asked yet. The station was in its night cycle, lights dimmed to simulate circadian rhythms that half the crew ignored anyway. He'd come here because he couldn't sleep, because the air recycling system was doing its angry refrigerator impression again, and because he'd developed an unfortunate habit of wondering where Lyra was when she wasn't in Lab 7. Your footsteps are different when you're tired, she said without turning around. Heavier. Less deliberate. It's 2 a.m. Everything about me is less deliberate. He dropped into the seat beside her, holding 2 pouches of the station's terrible hot chocolate. I brought peace offerings. They're equally bad, so we can suffer together. She accepted one with a small smile. The human tradition of bonding through shared misery. I'm starting to understand it. It's one of our best traditions. Right up there with complaining about whether we can't control and making awkward small talk in elevators. Adrian sipped his chocolate and immediately regretted it. Yep. Still tastes like sadness. Sadness with a hint of chemical sweetener. That's the deluxe version. They sat in silence for a moment, watching Earth rotate slowly below. From up here, it looked impossibly peaceful. No borders visible, no conflicts, just blues and greens and whites swirling in patterns that had existed long before humanity decided to complicate everything. I need to tell you something, Lyra said finally. Something that's not in my official statements. Something I should have mentioned weeks ago, but I was, she paused. Scared, I think. Is that the right word? When you're worried about how someone will react to truth. Adrian's chest tightened. That's the right word. And you don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share. I know. But you've been honest with me, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. You deserve the same. She turned to face him, and in the dim light, her amber eyes seemed to glow faintly. I didn't leave my homeworld just because I wanted privacy. I left because I was running from something. Someone. The weight in her voice made Adrian set down his terrible chocolate. You're in danger. Not immediate danger. Not here. But on Ethar, she struggled with the words. Our society is built on total transparency. Everyone hears everything. Every whisper, every breath, every emotional truth. It makes lying impossible, which sounds beautiful until you realize it also makes privacy impossible. And dissent. And individuality. That sounds suffocating. It is. For most Aetheri, it's just reality. They don't question it because they've never known anything else. But some of us, a very small percentage, we develop what the majority considers a disorder. A glitch. We want privacy. We want internal thoughts. We crave the ability to not share every feeling with everyone around us. Adrian felt something cold settle in his stomach. What happens to people like you? Officially? Therapy. Counseling. Medication to help us integrate better with our community. Unofficially? Lyra's voice dropped. There are research facilities. Places where they study us. Try to understand why some Aetheri develop this aberrant desire for boundaries. They're looking for genetic markers, neurological differences. They want to identify the trait and eliminate it. Eliminate it. You mean? I mean genetic screening. Selective breeding. Gene therapy for those already born with the trait. They call it optimization of social cohesion. They frame it as public health. Her hands were shaking slightly around the chocolate pouch. I was one of the researchers. I worked in one of those facilities. I thought I was helping people, helping society. And then I started seeing the data differently. Started understanding what we were really doing. Adrian's mind raced. You stole research. That's why you ran. I stole documentation. Evidence. Proof of what was being done to my own people in the name of social harmony. And when they realized what I'd taken, they couldn't just let me leave. I knew too much. I'd seen too much. She met his eyes. So I stole a ship. Turns out being able to hear security codes being entered is useful, and I ran. I'd been studying humanity for years, fascinated by your concept of privacy rights, individual autonomy. I thought if any species would understand, it would be yours. Does the committee know any of this? They know I requested asylum. They know I left my homeworld under difficult circumstances. They don't know the specifics. I told them I'd experienced philosophical differences with my government, which is technically true. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. I'm good at technically true statements. It comes from living in a society where you can't technically lie. Adrian processed this, his linguist brain catching on something. Wait. You said your people can't lie because everyone hears the emotional truth behind words. But you've been managing diplomatic conversations for months. How? Because I'm broken, remember? I'm part of the percentage that developed the aberrant trait. My ability to compartmentalize, to maintain internal thought separate from external expression, that's the disorder they were trying to eliminate. Turns out it's useful for espionage. Her voice carried bitter irony. The very trait that made me a research subject also made it possible for me to escape. That's not broken. That's just being a person. Try telling that to a society where personhood is defined by complete transparency. Lyra set down her chocolate, her hand steadier now. Do you know what it's like to be told that your most fundamental need, the need for private thoughts, for boundaries, is a sickness? To have doctors explain that your desire for internal life is a threat to social cohesion? No. But I know what it's like to feel wrong for being yourself. Humanity has its own history of calling differences disorders. That's why I chose your species. You fought those battles. You've argued about autonomy and privacy and individual rights for centuries. You're messy and contradictory and beautifully complicated about it. She smiled, sad and genuine. On Aethar, there's no debate. There's only consensus, because everyone can hear everyone's truth. Disagreement is impossible when all emotional states are public. But here, she gestured at Earth below. You argue. You debate. You maintain different viewpoints even when you fully understand each other. It's chaotic and frustrating and absolutely precious. Adrian found himself smiling despite the heaviness of the conversation. You ran away to join the circus of human dysfunction. Essentially, yes. Your dysfunction is my freedom. She paused. But Adrian, I need you to understand what this means. If my government finds out where I am, if they send a delegation to request extradition, I don't know what happens. They'll claim I stole proprietary research. They'll have legal grounds. And the evidence I took, the documentation of what they're doing. I can't risk it falling back into their hands. Where is it? The evidence. Encoded in my ship's navigation systems. Hidden in frequency patterns that look like background radiation to anyone who doesn't know what they're looking at. It's safe for now. But if they force me to return, we won't let that happen. The words came out before Adrian fully thought them through, but he didn't take them back. You came here for asylum. Humanity has laws about that. They can't just extradite you for political crimes. Can't they? I'm not human. I'm not protected by your laws. Then we make them protect you. We argue. We debate. We do that chaotic human thing where we fight about what's right until someone listens. Adrian leaned forward. You said you studied humanity. You know we're stubborn when we think something's unjust. Sometimes stupidly stubborn. You'd fight for me. Risk your career, your standing with the committee. Lyra, in the last 6 weeks, you've become the most interesting part of my life. You taught me that sarcasm sounds terrifying in Etherian. You hacked station communications to send me fake emergency messages. You made Dr. Yamamoto laugh by explaining that his toupee is acoustically distinct from natural hair, and you could hear the difference. You're brilliant and funny and probably the loneliest person on this station who isn't me. He met her eyes. So yes. I'd fight for you. Because you're not a research subject or a diplomatic asset. You're my friend. The word hung in the air between them, surprisingly heavy for something so simple. Lyra's ears did a complex series of movements that Adrian couldn't interpret, but her expression was readable enough. Surprise. Relief. Something that might have been gratitude or might have been fear that this, too, could be taken away. I've never had a friend before, she said quietly. On Ethar, we have communal bonds. Social cohesion. Shared purpose. But friendship, the deliberate choice to connect with someone specific, to prioritize that relationship, it's not really a concept when everyone is connected to everyone. There's no choosing involved. Well, I'm choosing. And for what it's worth, you're surprisingly good at friendship for someone who's never tried it. I'm learning from context clues. You humans are very educational about relationships. All your movies are basically instruction manuals. Please tell me you haven't been learning friendship from romantic comedies. I've been learning from all your entertainment. Romantic comedies, action movies, those nature documentaries where predators hunt prey, very informative about human priorities. Adrian laughed. I feel like there's a concerning worldview developing there. Humans contain multitudes. You want love and violence and information about penguin mating habits, apparently all at the same time. It's endearing and slightly alarming. That's basically our species' motto. He picked up his chocolate again, grimacing at the taste but drinking it anyway. So what do we do? About your government, about the possibility of extradition? For now. Nothing. They don't know exactly where I am. Space is large, and humanity has multiple stations and settlements. As long as I maintain a low profile, she stopped, laughing. Which is impossible when you're the only alien in the solar system. Never mind. We could increase your visibility. Make you too public to quietly extradite. Public opinion is powerful. Or it makes me an easier target. Lyra shook her head. I don't know the right answer. I'm making this up as I go, which is terrifying for someone from a society that plans everything through collective consensus. Welcome to being human. We're all making it up. Some of us just pretend better. They sat in companionable silence, sipping their terrible chocolate and watching Earth turn. Adrian's mind was already spinning through possibilities, protocols, legal frameworks. Asylum law, extradition treaties, the murky legal status of alien refugees. It was complicated. It was probably impossible. But he'd meant what he said. He'd fight for her. Because in 6 weeks, Lyra had gone from diplomatic assignment to actual person, and somewhere in that transformation, she'd become someone he couldn't imagine losing. Adrian. Lyra's voice was soft. Thank you. For listening. For not treating this like I'm a problem to be solved. You're not a problem. You're a person with a problem. There's a difference. Your species makes that distinction. Mine doesn't. She smiled. I'm starting to understand why I ran here. You see individuals first. It's messy and inefficient and absolutely beautiful. We're a disaster species with occasional moments of grace. But the grace is worth the disaster. I'm counting on that. Lyra stood, stretching. I should let you sleep. Your breathing suggests exhaustion, and your heart rate has been elevated since I told you about my government. You're worried. Of course I'm worried. You just told me you're a refugee with possible government agents looking for you. Possible. Unlikely but possible. Space is very large. Space is large, but determined governments are resourceful. Adrian stood too. Promise me something. If anything changes, if you hear anything suspicious, you'll be the first to know. I promise. Her expression softened. And Adrian? If they do come, if it gets complicated, you don't have to fight for me. I won't hold it against you if. Stop. I already told you I'm fighting. You don't get to talk me out of it before it even happens. Stubborn. Stupidly stubborn. You said so yourself. It's a human trait. Lyra's smile was genuine now, reaching her strange amber eyes. Then I'm glad I chose your species. Stubborn humans are exactly what I need. As Adrian walked back to his quarters, Earth spinning serenely below and Jupiter watching from its eternal position, he made a mental note to research asylum law. And extradition treaties. And possibly how to hide an alien woman with superhuman hearing if everything went wrong. It was going to be complicated. But then again, the best things usually were. The alarm came at 0400 on a Tuesday, which Adrian would later reflect was entirely appropriate because Tuesdays were when the universe liked to cause problems. The station-wide alert klaxon dragged him from sleep with all the subtlety of a screaming cat, and his tablet was already flashing with emergency notifications before his feet hit the floor. Unidentified vessel approaching Helio 7. All personnel to stations. Adrian's blood went cold. He was pulling on clothes and running for Lab 7 before his conscious brain fully caught up, because he absolutely knew, what an unidentified vessel meant. Lyra had said space was large. She'd said it was unlikely. Unlikely wasn't the same as impossible. Lab 7 was empty. Adrian's heart kicked into overdrive until his tablet buzzed with a message, Observation Lounge. I can hear their ship's engines from here. They're loud. He found her at the window, perfectly still, watching a vessel materialize in the space between Helio 7 and Jupiter. It looked like her ship but larger, more angular, humming with that same impossible frequency that meant space was folding around it like origami. They found me, Lyra said. Her voice was calm, but Adrian could see her hands shaking. I don't know how, but they found me. How long do we have? They're requesting docking clearance. Standard diplomatic protocols. They'll claim they're here to negotiate my return, probably with very legal-sounding justification. She turned to face him. Adrian, you should go. Whatever happens next, you don't need to be part of it. We've had this conversation. I'm not going anywhere. He was already pulling up station protocols on his tablet, scanning through asylum procedures and extradition law. You requested asylum. There are processes. They can't just take you. They can if your government decides I'm not worth the diplomatic incident. Commander Petrov's voice crackled over the station intercom. Dr. Cole, report to the command deck immediately. Lyra as well. They made their way through corridors filled with nervous personnel. Everyone had heard about the alien woman on Helio 7. Everyone knew this moment had been coming eventually. First contact couldn't stay simple forever. The command deck was controlled chaos. Petrov stood at the center, surrounded by screens showing the Etherian vessel from multiple angles. 3 figures were visible in the transmission feed, tall, elegant, with those same distinctive pointed ears. They looked remarkably like Lyra, which somehow made them more unsettling. They're requesting an audience, Petrov said without preamble. They claim Lyra stole classified research and fled to avoid prosecution. They're asking for her extradition under interstellar law, which, he glanced at his legal advisor, who looked deeply uncomfortable. Is complicated because we don't technically have interstellar law yet. So make some up, Adrian said. Asylum law exists. She came here as a refugee. She came here claiming philosophical differences with her government. She didn't mention theft. Lyra stepped forward. Because calling it theft is a convenient fiction. I took documentation of human rights abuses being conducted on my own people. That's not theft. That's whistleblowing. The legal advisor perked up at that. Whistleblowing has protections under human law. If you can prove the documentation shows actual abuses. I can prove it. But the proof is encoded in my ship's systems, and if they take me back, they take the ship. Petrov looked between them. What kind of abuses are we talking about? Lyra explained, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. Genetic screening. Forced therapy. Research facilities studying people like her as if their desire for privacy was a disease to be cured. The casual elimination of individual autonomy in the name of social harmony. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Petrov said, show me the evidence. Commander, if the Etherian delegation sees us accessing her ship, the legal advisor started. Then they'll know we're taking her claims seriously, which we should be doing anyway. Petrov's expression was granite. I didn't sign up for Helio 7 to participate in extraditing refugees. Show me the evidence. What followed was the most surreal 2 hours of Adrian's life. Lyra accessed her ship remotely, pulling encoded data from navigation systems and translating frequency patterns into visual documentation. Medical records. Research protocols. Video files of Etheri being subjected to procedures designed to eliminate their capacity for private thought. Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd been called in for her xenobiology expertise, went progressively paler as the data loaded. They're treating neurological diversity as a pathogen. This is eugenics. That's what I tried to tell them, Lyra said quietly. They couldn't hear me. Literally. In a society where everyone hears everything, the people arguing for the right to not be heard are definitionally wrong. Their desire for privacy proves they're disordered. Adrian found his voice. That's circular logic that would make a philosophy professor weep. It's airtight logic if everyone already agrees with the premise. That's the problem with total transparency, dissent becomes impossible because the majority's truth drowns out everything else. Petrov was already composing a response to the Etherian delegation. We're denying extradition. Lyra's claim of asylum is granted under the protection of human law, pending formal establishment of interspecies legal frameworks. We're treating this as a human rights issue. They're not going to accept that, Lyra said. They'll argue I'm not human, so human rights don't apply. Then we'll argue that rights are universal or they're meaningless. Petrov hit send and turned to his communications officer. Get me a line to Earth. UN headquarters. We're going to need backup on this, and we're going to need it loud. The next 3 days were a blur of transmissions, legal arguments, and increasingly tense standoffs. The Etherian delegation refused to leave. They couldn't force their way onto Helio 7 without committing an act of war, but they could wait, applying diplomatic pressure and filing increasingly elaborate legal briefs. Adrian spent most of that time with Lyra in Lab 7, because the observation lounge felt too exposed and her quarters were too isolating. They talked, really talked, about everything and nothing. About her childhood on a world where silence was impossible. About his studies of theoretical alien communication that had seemed so abstract until an actual alien showed up. About the absurdity of fighting for someone's right to privacy when they could hear your every whispered thought anyway. You know what's funny? Lyra said on the third day, watching the Etherian ship through the window. I ran away to find privacy, and I ended up choosing to give it away. To you. To the people here. I could have hidden what I can hear, pretended to have normal human hearing. But I told you the truth instead. Why did you tell me? Because privacy isn't valuable if it's forced. The whole point is having the choice. I wanted to choose to share things with you, knowing you knew I could hear everything. She smiled. Turns out chosen transparency is completely different from mandatory transparency. Who knew? Philosophers, probably. They're annoyingly right about these things. A message alert interrupted them. Patricia Hammond from the Oversight Committee, requesting their presence in the conference room. Both of them. Immediately. The conference room was packed. Petrov, Patricia, the legal team, Dr. Chen, and half a dozen other personnel Adrian didn't immediately recognize. On the main screen was a feed from Earth, specifically, from UN headquarters, where apparently humanity's various governments had spent 3 days arguing about alien rights, asylum law, and whether telling another species how to handle their internal affairs was bold humanitarian intervention or catastrophic diplomatic overreach. The vote had been close, but decisive. Earth officially recognized Lyra's asylum claim. They were offering her protected refugee status with full human rights protections, pending the establishment of proper interspecies legal frameworks. And they were telling the Etherian government, in the most diplomatically careful language possible, to go away. This sets an interesting precedent, the UN representative on screen said. If we're claiming aliens are entitled to human rights protections, we're essentially arguing that rights are universal. Which means we're implicitly criticizing the Etherian government's treatment of their own citizens. That's going to have consequences. Good, Patricia said, surprising everyone. Some consequences are worth having. We can't claim to value individual autonomy and then ignore it when it's inconvenient. Lyra was staring at the screen like she couldn't quite process what she was hearing. You're risking diplomatic relations with my entire species for me. We're risking diplomatic relations for a principle, Petrov corrected. You're just the person who made us actually think about it instead of treating it as abstract philosophy. Also, Adrian added, you're our friend. Humans are stupidly loyal to our friends. We covered this. I thought you were exaggerating. I really wasn't. The Etherian delegation left 6 hours later, filing formal protests and promising this wasn't over. But they left. And Lyra stayed. A month later, Adrian found her in the observation lounge again, but this time she wasn't staring at Earth like it held answers. She was reading, actually reading, a physical book she'd borrowed from the station library about the history of civil rights movements on Earth. Research? Adrian asked, dropping into the seat beside her with 2 pouches of hot chocolate that were somehow even worse than usual. Context, Lyra corrected. I want to understand how your species argues about rights. How you change laws when they're unjust. How you fight for people who can't fight for themselves. She accepted the chocolate with a grimace. Also, I'm trying to figure out how to help the Etheri like me who are still on my homeworld. The ones who can't run. That's a long-term project. I have time. I'm not going anywhere. She smiled. Your government is still arguing about what exactly my legal status is. Apparently, alien refugee with superhuman hearing who can tell when you're lying doesn't fit neatly into existing categories. We'll make a new category. We're good at that. We have 17 different tax brackets and 43 words for sandwich. We can figure out alien citizenship. Lyra laughed, that bell-like sound that still surprised him every time. You know what I realized? When I first came here, I thought privacy was the goal. The thing I was missing. But it's not. Privacy is just a tool for something else. Which is choice. Agency. The ability to decide what to share and what to keep, who to trust and who to keep at distance. On Ethar, everyone knows everything about everyone, which sounds like perfect honesty until you realize it eliminates choice entirely. Here, I can choose to tell you things. I can choose to let you hear my whispers. That choice is what makes it meaningful. Adrian thought about that. So you ran away to find privacy, and what you actually found was autonomy. Exactly. And autonomy is terrifying and wonderful, and I'm still figuring it out. She set down her book. Thank you, by the way. For fighting for me. For being stupidly stubborn about it. You're welcome. Though technically, I didn't do much. Petrov and the UN did the heavy lifting. You believed me first. You chose to hear me before anyone else did. That matters. They sat in companionable silence, watching Jupiter do its eternal watching routine. The station hummed around them, full of researchers and diplomats and people still figuring out what first contact actually meant beyond the headlines and protocols. Adrian's tablet buzzed with another message from the committee. More questions, more requests for documentation, more attempts to fit the extraordinary into ordinary boxes. He'd answer them eventually. But for now, he was exactly where he wanted to be, sitting with his friend who could hear every whispered thought, choosing to share silence instead of filling it with noise. Adrian? Lyra said softly. Yeah. You're muttering again. Something about the committee and paperwork and creative uses for filing systems. He laughed. Sorry. Bad habit. Don't apologize. Your muttering is my favorite human behavior. It's honest. She paused. Also, I agree with your assessment of the committee's filing system. It's deeply inefficient. You're enabling my worst traits. That's what friends do, apparently. I'm learning. Outside the window, Earth turned. Jupiter watched. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, two people from different worlds had found something neither had expected. The complicated, messy, absolutely precious freedom of choosing who to trust with the truth. It wasn't the ending either of them had planned. But then again, the best things rarely were.